22.
Update on the resolution from the Board of Supervisors, a new elementary school project. I would like to ask Mr. Scott Mullins, if he would please, to share with us information regarding those topics.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Mr. Chair, members of the board, we're here tonight. The agenda has two parts. First is the open session, a summary and update on the elementary school, and then the closed session portion deals with the litigation associated with the Board of Supervisors and IDA. And those two matters are certainly related, but we're going to deal with them in two separate parts. I can go into the things that have developed since we last met, and then we would like to go into closed session and get guidance from the board on how we respond. There is good news. We think that since we last met, the Board of Supervisors have given us some information and some direction, and we'll go over it, the details of it with you in closed session and make sure we're all on the same page when we're talking about it. But in summary, on April 30th, we received a letter from the chair that summarized the resolutions that were taken by his board, I believe the night before. And I will go through these individually very quickly, and we'll talk about them. The first one was that the Board of Supervisors recognizes the legal right of the school board to pick the location of the new elementary school. And that is one of the primary issues that was involved in the litigation that was filed in 2019. It was essentially the issue that brought the project to a halt, because the boards could not agree on the location, and because we had signature blocks on all the checks with a member of the IDA sign, not a member, but the director of the IDA signing, and a representative of the Board of Supervisors, the county administrator, and the division superintendent for the school board signing. And so the location seemed to be the issue that was essentially the threshold issue. And so we appear to have gotten beyond that issue, and that is very good news. Number two, the Board of Supervisors appropriated $250,000 by budget amendment to the school board for engineering and design of the new elementary school. See that also as very good news. From November of 2018 to the present, we've not had money available to move forward because, as I said earlier, it required signatures for 3 signatures, and we only were authorized internally to do 1. The statement that the Board of Supervisors appropriated $250,000 by budget amendment, just to be clear, that is not new money. The term appropriated, it's basically that they are authorizing the use by the school board of $250,000 of the money that was provided by the Corps of Engineers. So I don't want anybody to be happy in thinking we have a $250,000 addition to our budget. We don't, but we do have access to $250,000, which is needed for us to move forward with the PPEA. Thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, it's written that the Dickinson County Board of Supervisors will appropriate approximately $24.4 million of core money to the school board without any restrictions. And that is extremely good news. I think that because we're polarized, we read things and we think of it in terms of how does the Board of Supervisors read this and how does the school board read it. Those two ways I think are obvious to everyone. But the third way of reading it, I don't think people necessarily appreciate, and that is the way a construction company that's going to do a $18,000 to $20,000, $20 million contract with you reads it. And as I've said before, the primary concern for me as your attorney is to make sure that any contract that we enter into with a third party, that we have the ability to fulfill, to complete, to hold up our end of the bargain, that contract. And it would just be unacceptable to go into a situation where we sign that contract, we have a contractor come up, and then for some reason internally among ourselves in Dickinson County, we end up where we've been since November of 2018 in a deadlock. So I think that of all the things that have been said in the letter, that is very, very positive news. And I think that that gives us what we need to start moving forward and talking with contractors, putting things together. I think that there's been confusion because the PPEA is a procurement tool. And I think that because it's a relatively recent tool, there's been confusion about how it works. And, you know, I think historically in Dickinson County, we're accustomed to a typical design bid build, which means you hire an architect to design your school. And then you put it out for bid. And if the bids come back within your budget, then you hire the contractor and they build your school. So that's called design, bid, build. The PPEA is a different procurement approach. Under the PPEA, what you do is you contract with an architect and a construction contractor, a school builder. You also involve an earth mover, and they are all on one team. Under the design, bid, build, the architect and the contractor, they're not connected, but at PPEA they are. The PPEA gives you a lot of flexibility. Wise County built its schools with the PPEA. Dickinson County built its judicial center with the PPEA. It has shown itself to be much more flexible and expedient. I think that even when we were disagreeing with the county about how we would go forward, there was always an agreement with the folks on the IDA and the Board of Supervisors that the PPEA was the best procurement tool. But I think that the one thing about the PPEA that has led to some confusion is that when you do a PPEA procurement, you meet with 1, 2, or 3 groups of builders, earth movers, architects, and they do a lot of work for you up front, and often at no cost to you, because they're trying to show and demonstrate to you that as a team, they have the capacity to do the best job for you to build you a school. And so what that means as a practical matter is that they do a lot of the due diligence that ordinarily the architect would do under a design, bid, build. And there's no need, if you're doing a PPEA, to spend money to have an architect or civil engineering firm do work, because when you do the PPEA, their team will include architects, civil engineers, a builder, an earth mover, a general contractor. And so what you do is you ask those people that do it for a living, not people that are giving you estimates of what might happen, but people that do it for a living to do the due diligence necessary to determine things that are critical for your school to succeed. Things like here at Ridgeview, as we're here at this building, we are over no abandoned mine works. But there are abandoned mine works where below us deep mining has occurred out where the fields are. You want to make sure that you build your school on firm ground. That is what the PPEA people look at. If we were to talk about other things such as your sewage capacity. This facility has its own sewage set up for it. It's not part of the public system that goes off. You would want to make sure that if you build a school here, that the capacity for your sewage would be appropriate. Gas, if you built a school here, you'd want to make sure that you had enough gas capacity. And this is not, I'm focusing on Ridgeview, but it would be the same wherever you go. There are things that are threshold issues to build a major public construction project, and you want people that have done this numerous times to evaluate your property, because in the end, after you go through the PPEA procurement process, you're going to shortlist down proposers from 3 to 2 or maybe just 3 to 1. But you're going to rank people based upon your belief and certain criteria that they are the best team to provide and construct a school for Dickinson County. When they sign that contract, they are making a group of representations and warranties in writing that are contractually binding on them. And some of those are dealing with a warranty for that your school will continue to be built in a good and workmanlike manner, consistent with all building codes, things you would expect. Then there are other things in there that you might not appreciate, like you do have the gas capacity, you do have your sewage, you have the capacity there to deal with it, that you are on firm earth when you build. Those things are critical, and if they're going to sign off on that, then they're going to make sure that they do appropriate due diligence. So it's been asked often, why hasn't the Dickinson County School Board picked a location? And the answer to that is you don't pick a location until you evaluate the locations. And from the beginning, if you go back and go through the minutes of the school board and the Board of Supervisors, you will see that we have advocated for information. We have been an advocate when this first started for a 3-site PPEA. And that would have evaluated Ridgeview, it would have evaluated Clinchco, and Upper Backbone. I was looking through the minutes of the meeting this morning, and I believe it was in March of 2018. Shelby Willis made a motion that we move forward with the 3-site PPEA. And that motion failed for a second. It did not get a second. So it died there on the vine. But what I can tell you is that if we had gone forward in 2018 with a 3-site PPEA in a way that the school board wanted to do, the way that Ms. Willis presented, that within 6 months, we would have had proposers standing in front of you, the Board of Supervisors, the IDA, and they would not have been giving you an estimate or a guess. They would be standing there with a contract saying, at this location, I can build this school. At this second location, I can build this. At this third location, I can build this. And I really think that if we have made a mistake as a county, it was made then, because we should always have, on something this important, it should not have been about where your heart tells you a school should be. I'm not saying that's not a factor, but it also should be what people that do this for a living say you can build there. It's picking a school site is not like picking a puppy. It's not a subjective thing. You really do need people to do their due diligence, come back and report to you, and make sure that before you pick it and start going down the proverbial rabbit hole that costs money, you've got enough information that you've acquired at a relatively small cost to know that you can finish it there. So I'm sorry to get on a tear about that, but that's my long-winded way of saying that number 3, when the Board of Supervisors said that they would appropriate that money without restriction, if you are a PPEA proposer and you're going to go out and partner up with an architectural firm, an earth mover, maybe a transportation expert, maybe an education planner, if you're going to come and start doing a lot of work on your own, with your own money, then you do not want to hear the language that the school board is ready to go forward, but it's subject to some other approvals. So with the action that the Board of Supervisors has taken, that concern is gone, and we should be very appreciative of that. So going on to the next thing, in general terms, we have $8 million in a construction account. It's actually 3 accounts, but we have $8 million total. And that money is in the account that we use to do all of the work that was done at Ridgeview. And the Board of Supervisors got some qualified school construction bonds. And at that time, we thought we would need those in order to do the work that was necessary to finish the school. And at the time we got them, there was 0 interest. And then after we entered into the obligation for we call it QSCAD, those qualified school construction bonds. After we got those bonds, in January of 2016, the Corps of Engineers told us that the money had been made available to them and that they were ready for us to move forward. Well, what that meant was that a lot of the potential interest costs that we had on a $42 million rural development loan just disappeared. The day we got that news from the Corps, we had made earlier to build this facility, to build Ridgeview, we had a $42 million loan. And so when the Corps said, we've got your money now, you can pay off that rural development loan, we took the money that was allocated to Ridgeview from the Corps, and we paid that loan off and to rural development. and we had a note burning ceremony, and we were all, as a county, very, very happy to pay off the debt up here. But we did not pay off approximately $6.9 million of those QSCAB bonds. Now, the question might be asked, well, why didn't you just pay those off at the same time and be done with that? And we would have had, except the way those bonds are written, if we prepaid them, it was just a significant, atrocious amount of money. I don't hold me to this, but it seems like I remember it being $800,000 or $900,000 penalty. And so, you know, there's no way we were going to do that. And so we have that money to pay off those QSCAB bonds. And we'll just, for purposes of this discussion, say we've got $8 million in our construction account. The QSCAB bonds to pay off all debt associated with Ridgeview is $7 million. So that leaves us $1 million. So the basic deal proposed by the Board of Supervisors is you give us the $6.9 million or $7 million that we need to pay off the debt, and what we will do is the remaining $1 million, we want you to essentially escrow that $1 million, and we want to make sure, as good stewards of the taxpayers' money, that you can complete the new elementary school before you start spending money up here on things at Ridgeview. And I think there's been reference to a tennis shed, visitors' bathrooms. There was some concern that was stated, I remember Shanghai was a champion of this, that people that were handicapped that came to the ball games on the visitor side had to go a long way to get over to the Ridgeview side to use the bathrooms, and that the bathrooms were limited. But the bottom line is that there was a laundry list of things that we wanted to bring back to the school board and see how the school board wanted to spend that $1 million. Now, to be clear, that $1 million was part of the Ridgeview budget. And that's another common misconception, that somehow the Ridgeview project ate into the budget of the new elementary school. I can show you documents that probably go back 7 or 8 years ago, where this budget for the elementary school was established in our correspondence with the Corps of Engineers and in our correspondence with each other. That's simply not the case. But going back to the original premise of that $1 million, there was a laundry list of things, and we wanted to bring that to the school board and let the school board decide how that money would be applied. Board of Supervisors says you don't spend that money until you complete the elementary school, because you may need it for the elementary school. And I think that's a legitimate concern, and a concern that we can work through. And so this is what I think the Board of Supervisors needs to understand, is that $1 million that's left over, that is not all just discretionary spending, whether you do a tennis shed, whether you do visitors' bathrooms. It's not that at all. We have, when we built this school, believe it or not, there were wetlands on this ridge under the definition of the Corps of Engineers. And we were supposed to do wetlands remediation. And so originally, we were going to use the Irvington High School property because it was being abandoned as to create wetlands and to designate the stream to make up for the wetlands that were up here that we supposedly disturbed. And then when ultimately Contura took over Alpha's interest in the coal business, they said, well, and this was a long process, and I'm painting with a very broad brush, but Contura and Alpha said, we may open a coal mine down there someday. Well, you can't have a coal mine on land that's set aside for wetlands preservation. So we worked out a deal that's sort of complicated, but it involved the gas company, it involved the surface owner, the Heartwood Forest Land Group, and it involved the coal owner, which the coal owner is not Alpha or Contura, it's a separate entity that owns the coal. It's not related. But we worked out a deal to go up the road about 1.5 miles to a place called Spring Fork and do wetlands remediation. That's a big deal. And during the last year or so, while we've been disagreeing, the school board went ahead, put out an RFP, request for proposals. I think we met with 6 different contractors and went to the site at Spring Fork and basically shortlisted, negotiated, got a contract in place. And the contractor, quite naturally, doesn't want to sign a contract with us until he's sure that Dickinson County has got their differences resolved, because the money has to come out of our construction accounts. And so there's a requirement, and bear with me, but it is, there's a requirement to do mitigation at Spring Fork. There's a requirement to do, I don't know if it's 25 or 30 years, but there's a significant reporting requirement where you have to have people with an engineering background go out to your wetlands and make reports back to the Norfolk branch of the Corps of Engineers. Then another thing that we did, and this was at Lehman Kendrick's request, that would assist with wetlands mitigation, is we agreed to get straight pipes where raw sewage was coming out of Nora and straight into the river, to work with the Dickinson County Public Service Authority to fund with these construction funds some sewage treatment facilities so that we could get the straight pipes out of the McClure River. For those people, if we value the rafting or the kayaking at the Breaks Park, that's one of the things that the straight pipes are completely inconsistent for obvious reasons with that recreational use. So we need to talk with the Board of Supervisors. I don't think, and if you look at the agreement they sent, they basically proposed that they would get, that the full $1 million would be held in escrow until the elementary school is built. And, you know, it may take 2.5 years to get that elementary school completed. This wetlands remediation has to be done now. So we've got to have the money to do that now. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think there was any gotcha law involved in that omission. I think that it was just an oversight and probably comes about from litigating instead of talking with each other. But we need to fix that, and I'm optimistic that we can fix that. As far as the remaining money, whatever it is for those discretionary items, I really believe that the better reasoned view on that is that those monies are school board monies. They came to us because of our contract with the Corps of Engineers, and that should be the discretion of the school board. But this is about getting along and compromise and trying to find reasonable ways where everybody that has legitimate concerns get those concerns met. And so what I would recommend we consider is talking with them about when we go forward with the PPEA for the new elementary school, we will get a contract in writing that will have a guaranteed maximum price. And that guaranteed maximum price will be backed by an independent insurance company, a bonding company, to show that they can do it, that the contractor can fulfill their part of the bargain. Is called a performance bond. And so what I would recommend we think about and talk about with the Board of Supervisors is if we get to the point that we have a guaranteed maximum price on the elementary school, and we've made substantial progress, and we see that we're getting things done, I don't think we need to hold up 2.5 years to do those other things. It may seem like a small matter, but there are things that money could make a difference on. I'm sure if you came out here during a summer day and there's a tennis match going on and it starts to rain, it's just customary the kids have someplace dry to get under. Now, compared to what we've accepted and done over the years in our schools, that's nothing. That's insignificant. But given what we have here as a facility, there are things that we can do to make it better. And I'm not recommending that we do that in isolation. I think that sharing all that information with the Board of Supervisors, getting their input, that's what we should be doing. They are our ally in everything we go to do. So, but I think we just need to talk about that a little bit, that there's a reasonable middle ground we can get to. So there are other issues that we can talk about in closed session that are probably more appropriate for closed session. And after we talk about those, we can talk about any motions or resolutions that we want to make. I'm more than happy to answer questions that are not really involved in the details of litigation or negotiations. If we're going, again, we'll do those in closed session. But if there are any questions about what I've said here, I'll try to answer them.
Anyone have any questions or comments for Mr. Mullins?
I guess, Scott, just one I would have is hasn't the Norfolk office given us a time? I mean, like, this is when this wetlands remediation needs to be done?
I talked with Lance DeBoard, who's recognized as sort of an expert in that field. He helped us with the Ridgeview project. He's helped us all the way through. I think that the Norfolk Corps of Engineers would say that this should have been done last year. I think that they would say that there's an expectation that you make progress on it. I think that the Norfolk Corps of Engineers also recognizes that working with the IDA and the Board of Supervisors, it took a lot to move this project up to Spring Fork, because the gas owners and the coal owners had to release their right to the gas and to the coal under that property. So when the Norfolk Corps saw that and what all we're doing, I think they had a lot of discretion, and I think they said that's good enough, that you've done what you need to be doing. But I do think that they would have an expectation that we'd be moving forward promptly on that. We certainly can't just bury our head in the sand for 2.5 years. And we don't have the money in our school board accounts, in our regular operating budget. This is just something that should come out of the construction accounts. And quite honestly, since, 4 or 5 years, it's been a place mark in our budget of things that we had to do to complete Ridgeview. So it's not something that's a new creation. I'm sorry, did I answer your question? I think due diligence, if we just, set our efforts toward it, I don't think that they have a drop dead date. But they do expect some written evidence of progress.
Okay, thank you.
Scott, I can't remember which item it was in the resolution that the Board of Supervisors sent, but there's something about $3 million that they would appropriate. Would there be any restrictions with doing the mitigation with that?
That's a great point, Mr. Hackney, and I apologize. I think I didn't touch base on that, and that's a great point. First of all, because I see some of our Board of Supervisors members here, I'm tempted to say that I'm hoping that's new money and that we really have $27 million. That's $3 million additional new money, but that's not the case. When they say appropriate, we're talking about make available, and they would be repaid from our core budget. So it's not $3 million new money appropriated. It's just that we need interim financing when we start doing construction. And I think that what we've talked about before is that, and I'm not sure how they'll do that, they usually work with Davenport, but they will go out and through a letter of credit or a line of credit, through some investment strategy, whenever we are forced to pay a creditor, or no, I shouldn't say are forced, whenever we pay a creditor pursuant to the contract, generally speaking, those creditors want to be paid within 30 days. And so what you will see with this project is early on we will spend very little money. We'll spend a lot of time on paperwork. Then one day there'll be a bunch of machinery and materials show up at a job site, and you'll spend a bunch of money. When you spend millions of dollars, that $3 million will be needed because they'll send us a bill. We got to pay it right then, immediately, within 30 days. Generally speaking, though, that's the bad news. The good news is the Corps of Engineers historically can repay us within 45 days. It may be 60. So the money, the $3 million is, number one, not new money, but it's very timely money. And the expectation is that when we receive it, as soon as we can, we repay it to the Board of Supervisors. And at the outset, it has to be repaid before the project is over. And, the goal here from our perspective has to be the Board of Supervisors does not incur 1 cent of interest that it doesn't have to incur. Because ultimately, whatever money it incurs in the interim financing is coming out of this construction project. Did I answer your question, Mr. Hack?
I think earlier, Mr. Mullins, in earlier discussions, the 6.9 was going to be used as an investment, if I'm incorrect. I'm not certain now what it was, but the 6.9 would be used as an investment. Half of that money would be used for interim financing for that, and then, of course, the school board would repay through construction funds or core reimbursements immediately back to the county.
And that's an excellent point. It is easier to interim finance $3 million if they have the $6.9 million in cash, that we are taking out of construction accounts.
If there's no other comment, that brings us down to item 3 on the agenda, the closed session. Pursuant to section 2.2-3711, paragraph A of the Code of Virginia, I move the board convene a closed session to consult with legal counsel and receive briefings by staff members pertaining to actual litigation with the Board of Supervisors and the IDA regarding the location of the new proposed elementary school pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We're now in closed session.